Monday. Welcome to another virtual Preschool Science Series. My name is Sarah Snyder. I'm the program coordinator here at the Montana Science Center. And for today's lesson, we are going to be learning all about pine cones, so stay tuned. The title of this book is called From Start to Finish, which is the title of the series, From Cone to Pine Tree. And it is by Emma Carlson Byrne. Pine cones grow into trees. How do they do it? Let's find out. A pine tree makes pine cones. Pine trees make male pine cones and female pine cones. Male pine cones grow near the bottom of the tree. Female pine cones grow further up. The pine cones make pollen and egg cells. Male pine cones make pollen, and female pine cones make egg cells. The pollen and the egg cells need to come together for more trees to be made. The pine cones let their pollen out. When the air temperature is just right in the spring, the male pine cones open up. They let their pollen out. It falls to the ground. The pollen fertilizes the egg cells. Wind carries the pollen up near the top of the pine tree where the female pine cones grow. The pollen lands on the female cones. It combines with the egg cells inside the female cones. This is called fertilization. Next, the seeds grow inside the pine cones. After fertilization, seeds begin to grow inside the female pine cones, but fertilization takes a long time. It can take a whole year. In that year, the female pine cones grow too. They turn into the large woody cones you may have seen. The cones protect the pine tree seeds. As the seeds in female cones grow, the cones shelter the seeds. The hard wood outside the cone keeps the seeds safe inside. Even mature seeds stay safe. They are tucked between the petals of the cone. Then the pine cones open up. Once all the seeds are mature, the pine cones are ready to scatter the seeds. The cones open up their petals. Now the seeds can get out. The pine cones scatter their seeds. The pine cones release the seeds into the air. Wind and animals help scatter the seeds so they can land in good spots to grow. The seeds grow into pine trees. Seeds that land in good soil push down roots and push up needles. They grow into baby pine trees. Little trees get bigger. When the trees are grown, they make male and female pine cones, and the cycle begins again. The end. So now that we know a little bit more about how pine trees are formed from pine cones and the purpose behind pine cones, I thought we could do a very fun science experiment together. So the experiment is called a pinecone hygrometer. A hygrometer is an instrument to measure the humidity in the air. So follow along as I outline our. So for our pinecone hygrometers, I have two pine cones. They're not the densely wooded female pine cones that protect the egg cells, but I found these last fall and saved a few of them. So I have two pine cones. I'm going to leave one in just a jar with no water in it. In this jar, I have very, very cold water in. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave one pine cone in just the jar with air and put this pine cone in the cold water. You can pause this video and predict what will happen to this pine cone when I put it in the cold water. And this experiment takes a while, so you might have to come back to observe your pine cones every 10 or maybe even 15 minutes to observe changes. And it's always good to compare as well. Do you think the pine cone in the air will look different than the pine cone in the water? So I'm going to place it in there, make sure it's mostly submerged. And off the top of the experiment, off the top of our heads, I don't see any changes so far. They still look pretty similar. But like I said, we can come back to this in 10 or 15 minutes and observe the changes. For our craft today, while we are waiting for the pine cone in the cold water to observe any changes, I'll go over the directions for our craft. So when I've done this lesson in the past, I've put out multiple pine cones and parts of pine trees that I've found on the ground, and I'm not yanking off of the tree to disrupt its growth. If you don't have pine trees in your backyard, we have lots of great parks in the Gallatin Valley that now are starting to open back up again. And if the parks aren't open, certainly trails are. You can go kind of scavenging for those. So in the past, I've just put pine cones and parts of the pine tree on a tray with tweezers and other instruments that you can use to look at the parts of the pine tree. An extension of this would be to make a list of how they feel texture-wise. So how does a pine cone feel in your hands? Does it feel pokey? Does it feel dense? Does it feel soft? When I initially grabbed these pine cones last fall, some of them were still damp from some snowfall. So you could make that list as well and kind of just observe the pine cone and its traits. So there you have it. It's kind of a simple craft, but just very fun. And I've noticed children can spend upwards of 30 minutes just looking at pine cones, so it's very fun. Okay, so it's been about 15 or 20 minutes since I put the pine cone in the water. I'm going to take it out and show you what it looks like now. It's wet. Okay. So as you can see, all of the pine cone has started to close up. You can compare it to this one. So this experiment is called the Pinecone hygrometer experiment. A hygrometer, as I said before, is an instrument used to measure humidity. The air in Montana is pretty dry, so when it's less humid, the pine cone will stay open. When it's more humid, as in water, the pine cone will close. So there you have it. There's your experiment and kind of craft dissection of the week. We hope you all are well, and we'll catch you next time. All right, bye.